Good evening, folks, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. We have Colin is on tonight. We have Norflinger, great to see you. Jared McCartney, great to have you on. Hope you're well. Freddie B is here, great to see you, Freddie. Raven 1983 Witch, great to see you. Stefan Bankier, great to see you. Lake Life, hope you're well. We have you, great to see you. John O'Sullivan, great to have you on, John. Hope you're well tonight. Chatty Rat is here, great to see you, Chatty Rat. We have Phil, great to see you, Phil. Joe Cake is back. Young Ralph is here too. Killer, thanks for moderating, great to see you. Daily Blase, great to have you on. Hope you're well tonight. We also have Kevin Marsh, great to see you. The Lefty Boater with UBI. Alistair, great to see you. We also have Peter, Mark, Carol, Tiny Demolition Lover, hope you're well up there in Scotland. We have also John, Boomerage, great to see you. Who else have we got on tonight? Going through the list. Snake, great to see you. Frederick, great to have you on. Frederick, we also have Stuart Gibbs, great to see you, Stuart. The number 3, great to have you on. Katie, Mina, Wolf Pet is here as well. The Freckle Pony is here too. Mark Teffler, great to see you. Phil, another Phil, and all the Phils tonight. Fearless Wolf, Barney, Reagan Elite, Conservator CGM. Hope you're all very well. So I hope everyone had a great week. Ready for the weekend. So many things to talk about tonight. I'm going to try and fit in as much as I can. But to start off, we have, of course, seatbelt gate. Rishi Sunak, of course, fined it. So as I was setting up the stream, the news came in that Rishi Sunak has received a fixed penalty notice for not wearing a seatbelt in the back of a government car. Apologized, and now the question is who's going to pay the fine. I think it's about £700 actually. So I don't know if Rishi Sunak will pay it, or as usual one of the Tory donors will pay it instead. But it says here Downing Street has apologized again for Rishi Sunak not wearing a seatbelt while in the back of a moving car earlier this week. The number 10 spokesperson said on Friday that the incident was a mistake, even as Lancashire Constabulary began an investigation into whether the Prime Minister broke the law. So obviously he broke the law. This is a little bit old. It's from earlier today. It was a mistake, and he's apologized and thinks it's important. It's the important thing to do so. It's an important thing to do so, as people should wear their seatbelt. A spokesperson said, "I'm obviously not going to get ahead of any process. We've got the Lancashire Police have said." We've got what the Lancashire Police have said. The apology came a day after the video was uploaded to Sunak's Instagram page, showing him turning in his seat and talking to the camera about the government's levelling up agenda without wearing a seatbelt. The car was being escorted by police outriders at the time, taking the Prime Minister to a visit designed to publicise the awarding of millions of pounds worth of grants from the Levelling Up Fund. Yes, of course, this is money going to the constituencies, the Tory constituencies, maybe even his own one. It's not about levelling up. It's about propping up Tory MPs, or trying to help candidates win seats. It's not about targeting areas that are deprived. The Tories are very concerned in the south of England of losing their seats, not so much to the Labour Party, but to the Lib Dems. That's one of the reasons why they're sending money there. Like his levelling up was a mistake. It's not a mistake. He thinks he's above the law. That's all. BBC says it's £100. Will you afford it? Maybe they'll set up a GoFundMe, or you could get a Tory donor to pay the fine on his behalf, as they normally do. £500 would cripple me financially, like the poor peasant I am. Think we know why it's not based on income. Yes, I think in Switzerland it's actually based on income. So if you're if you're a multimillionaire and you receive a fine, it's based on your income, and you're going to receive and it makes perfect sense, because if you're loaded, you just pay the fine and move along. If you're a poorer and you've paid the fine, it could mean not being able to pay your rent that month, or not being able to pay your bills, or not being able to feed your family if you get a fine. Yeah, it's completely ridiculous why fines are not progressive. He'll pay it from expenses. Yeah, or maybe he'll put it through as an expense. Oh God! Now his excuse will be, "See, I should have gone by plane." Okay. Sticking with Rishi Sunak for a moment, baby steps as relaunched Rishi is sent out in front of a soft crowd. If at first you don't succeed, for his first few months as Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak's minders have tried to keep him away from the public as much as possible. The submarine commander leading us to victory from beneath the waves, or not, because it turns out that you can dislike what you don't see. And this is what Rishi Sunak has been doing over the last number of weeks and months almost, is he's kept a very low profile. The fact that he didn't go to Davos, why the hell didn't he go there? Wasn't he supposed to represent the country? Davos, sorry. The leader of the opposition went instead. The people in Davos would be asking, "Oh, who's the leader of Britain? Oh, it's that Keir Starmer guy." His cuffs always seem too short. Yeah, he needs to go to Jacob Rees-Mogg's tailor. Jacob Rees-Mogg Rees-Mogg's tailor overcompensates. Rishi's attempt to steady the economy and resolve the strikes have been met with the first skepticism and then incredulity. The man sold to us as a competent tech bro. The management consultant for all seasons was yet another Tory dud. Not much better than Liz Truss or Boris Johnson. Yeah, he was presented as, this is the guy who's going to fix the economy. This is the guy who's going to turn the ship around. And the polling is not really budging. I don't think it's gotten worse than Liz Truss, but it certainly hasn't really improved, which is a big concern for Tory MPs, because they were hoping, to avoid Johnson coming back, they'd put in Rishi Sunak, and Rishi Sunak would save the day, or at least stop the rot. But he hasn't really done that. He's hiding, using the old Boris Johnson trick, hide, and then when you do actually have to meet the public, make sure that it's a selected group of pro-Tory supporters, and then meet with them instead. Anyway, let's move on. Just a few things I wanted to cover as well. About I'm going to get to this a little bit later, but the strikes. This was an interesting posted by James Wells, on an ex-engineer, who posted this on Twitter. While this is a condition of any pay offer, it's not going to be accepted. We should consider how we should be making the railway accessible to all, and closing ticket offices isn't the answer. And this is one of the main proposals being put forward by the rail network. It says here, station ticket offices all to be closed or repurposed, subject to the statutory public consultation process, which the RMT does not support. There's a real concern that some of the reforms, they call them, or efficiencies that they're putting through by the rail network, will of course marginalise disabled people who need assistance at the stations. If there's nobody at the station, then they're not going to be able to properly use the rail network or use it in a safe way. Why are the companies doing this? Well, of course, it's to maximize profit. If you can lay people off, then you don't need to pay them to be helping disabled people. If disabled people don't turn up, then you don't need to have the staff. Don't provide a service, people won't use it. Then if they don't use it, they can't use it, then you can justify, oh, so we don't need it. It's maximising profit and maximising dividends for shareholders. And we saw that this week. Even the Tory minister was basically saying, yeah, that's what it's about. It's not about providing, making sure that the workers are paid enough in order for them to provide to provide a service. It's about protecting the companies, and the government is throwing money at good money at bad. Tom Elaine, thanks so much for that super chat. Sorry, Max, only have been thawing out my donkey. It's a bit chilly there. It's a bit chilly here. Sorry to hear that. I hope you're able to switch on the heating a little bit. Thanks so much for the support there. Here it's about, I'm just looking at the temperature here, is 1 degree, so it's very cold at the moment, but it was very chilly, very windy yesterday, which was made it feel even colder. But we're quite lucky, because I know there are people in the UK are much colder, and I hope this cold period doesn't last too long, because it'll require people to put on their heating, and many people can't afford that at the moment. Thanks so much for that support, that super chat. We have Gareth once again. Gareth, thanks so much for that super chat as well. RS will drop a section 35 in front of the fine. Rishi's drop a section 35 in front of I'm refusing to pay the fine. You're not allowed to impose a fine upon me. Like what's happening in Scotland. My God. The Tories were against devolution, of course, and they've been trying to, weaken devolution since they've come to power. And if they could, I'm pretty sure they would close down the Scottish Parliament tomorrow, but the repercussions would be pretty severe. But if they could, they would close it down and return power to Westminster. That's what it's about. And this week saw a taste of that. -3 outside my house, Alistair. Try and keep warm. Sorry to hear that. Anyway, when it comes to taxes, it says here, I'm a millionaire. This is why I'm at Davos begging to pay more tax. This is an interesting thing that we generally think as multimillionaires, maybe even some billionaires, are people who, are trying to avoid paying tax. They don't want to pay tax. Many of them actually do want to pay tax. They realize, look, I'm in a very comfortable position. I've benefited from the system, but I want to give something back. And it's no point, the response from the right wing and others will be, well, just write a check. But that doesn't change the system. That doesn't fix the problem. So you need to bring in a higher rate of tax. And it says here, as a member of the patriotic Millionaires UK, I'm a self-confessed wealthy individual who spends a lot of time repeatedly asking the government to increase taxes on my wealth and the wealth of people like me. That's why it's important. It's not just this individual, Phil White, it says here. It's not just that Phil White sends a check to the Exchequer, to the Inland Revenue. It's important that the system changes. This week, the message has brought me to snowy Davos, where the World Economic Forum meets annually to discuss major economic concerns. The current theme of cooperation in a fragmented world sounds great. So why do I feel it necessary to join a protest against it? The answer is that the answer to that question lies in what I see, what I and others see as the root of that fragmentation. The worrying wealth extremism that goes neglected by the Davos elite. I'm one of the 200 plus millionaire signatories around the world on an open letter that was sent to global leaders attending the World Economic Forum. As we say in the letter, we're living in a world of extremes. Across the world, we see economic and political division deepen. Trust in political leaders is at a low point, as far as many people struggle with the cost of heating and eating, and no one seems to be doing anything about it. So this is a good step forward, The group called Patriotic Millionaires UK saying, look, we should be paying more in taxes. It's not correct that there are so many people who are struggling at the moment. And, you know, if there are loopholes, of course the millionaires and billionaires will take advantage of those loopholes. And asking them just to write a check isn't going to fix it. This division has worsened recently, though the years of the pandemic, more millionaires were created, while most people struggling on reduced incomes and lockdowns. Globally, we are now witnessing extreme wealth and extreme poverty rising simultaneously. In the UK, key workers were awarded by clapping in the streets and by a growing number of food banks, while the ultra-wealthy saw their fortunes grow as asset prices increased, fueled by furlough payments rippled through rent and loan interest. Society became more fractured than ever before. We talked about building back better. What we saw was the return to business as usual. And that's why he's at this event, to try and push for more taxes on the richest in society. It'd be great to speak with Phil White. Maybe I can try and contact him about having him on the Sunday Roast to get his take. If Phil is listening to this, it'd be great if Phil is listening to this. You'd be definitely welcome to come on and tell us about this initiative, because it's not just a case of, as I said, of people writing checks or donating money to charity. There needs to be massive change in society. We need to start taxing people who actually have the money and not those who don't. Let me read some of your comments before we move on. I'm for taxing 100% above a certain amount, like what happened in the US in the late 1940s, early 1950s. The president, there was a tax rate of 90%, I think it was around 95%. So the fine is only £100. The fine for Rishi Sunak. Wow. Will he be able to pay it? Maybe he'll use his contactless credit card. Good luck with that. In London, rich women live 19.1 years longer than poor women. Rich men live 17.2 years longer. Because you have access to better food, you have access to you have access to gyms, you have access to you have lower levels of stress, better quality of life. You probably live in a more spacious apartment or house, so you're going to have a much better quality of life. And 19 years and 17 years, that's shocking. We're expected, when growing up, we're told that life would get better. So for some, yes. Won't the wealthy just move to the tax haven? Well, people like Phil isn't willing to move. So, this is something that's always used as an excuse. We can't tax people more because they'll move. Has anyone seen Aaron Bastani's TED Talks about UBI? No, I haven't. I follow Aaron on Twitter, so I must check out his UBI speech. I will check that out. Gary Stevenson is part of the Patriotic Millionaires. He was great on Politics Live today, speaking to us, and I have a video in response to that. Gary, wonderful guy. Need more people like him, and he's speaking truth to power as well, and that needs to continue. Who was the klutz on Fool of the Week? So this week's Fool of the Week was Isabel Oakeshott. She's the partner of Richard Tice, who's the head of the Reform UK party. Used to be a member of the Brexit party. And, I posted in the video, it looked like she was reading a script. But that was not the main point. The main point was she was talking about how people are, you can buy fruit and vegetables really cheap. You can buy potatoes really cheaply. This is somebody who's married to, I believe, a millionaire. I was just thinking about it after, and I always, sometimes when I finish the video and then I should have talked about this in it. In the video she was talking about how, well, we can't put on the heating. by saying that, she destroyed her own argument. Because why is she not putting on the heating? Well, because she needs to save money. I don't believe she actually meant that. She put on the heating. She can well afford it if Richard Tice is our partner. But if she was saying, well, we hardly put on the heating, we put the children in blankets to keep warm. If you're doing that as a millionaire, then how can you say that people who have less money than you should not be going to food banks because they should have enough money? Does she actually, when she was writing her script, did she actually have it proofread? Did she say, is this consistent? Is this internally consistent? No, not really. He sounds like a control freak. The UBS won't work as good as UBI. What is it? Universal Basic. I don't know UBS. What? Universal Basic Services, not UBI. No, then I probably won't agree with that. This is something that I find really concerning, and I saw it with I think with Sam Cedar in the US, where he was against the UBI because he was saying, well, we need the welfare state, and what about people who are on welfare? Shouldn't they get the UBI included, along with the welfare? But the idea of a UBI is that you don't need welfare. It replaces the welfare state. If you have welfare and a UBI, you're still going to have a bureaucracy. The idea about one of the benefits of a UBI is that you eliminate the bureaucracy of the welfare state. So I think what many people on the left are saying, that you should actually have welfare state and a UBI if you want to have a UBI. But it's a bit redundant, and it doesn't get rid of the bureaucracy of. Once again, one of the advantages of having a UBI is you don't means test it. Everyone gets it, so you save money. The state saves money in on the bureaucracy front. I hear you, Max. I think we're on the same page. But I will check out the video because I heard something about the universal basic services, but there are many people who are very critical of a UBI. I understand on the right because they just don't like poor people to get money, but I really don't understand the criticism on the left. I think many of them fear that it's going to take away welfare, and then people will be I don't know. Honestly, I need to check it out. UBI eliminates the stigma. Well said. The stigma. There shouldn't be a stigma connected to welfare because it's a social safety net for everyone. It should be there for everyone. But there is a stigma connected to it, and the right-wing media have reinforced that stigma over the years, and that's why it's important that we eliminate the stigma. But a UBI would completely eliminate, because everyone would be receiving it. There'd be no, oh, look at those people on their UBI, yeah, like me and you. Tom Leg, thanks once again for that super chat. Comfortably Numb by Pink Floyd sums it up right. I must revise the song and the lyrics. Thanks very much for that. But yeah, many of the songs from the 70s, I presume it was from the 70s, had a very powerful message that resonates once again today. It was a very interesting time in politics and upheaval that was taking place, and the response, for example, to the Vietnam War in particular in the US, but also something that spread around the world as well. Alistair, thanks so much for that super chat. Funds to keep the excellent, informative, quality content, Max. Thank you so much, Alistair. Very kind of you. Thank you so much. Max, you need to address folk who are currently on PIP. This is what there is an expert on Discord. I won't name names, but this person knows who they are. I would love to have on to talk about this, about PIP and about universal credit and things like that. Be great to have somebody on who's an expert who knows these things, because I don't know the ins and outs of it, and the problems related to it, because many people are struggling at the moment, and universal credit isn't cutting the mustard. People are being pushed and it was a few days ago I was talking about how people over 50 were being pushed into doing pushed into jobs. What was it? Internships of over 50s. I don't know if I talked about it on the stream or we talked about it after, but this is really concerning. Internships for the over 50s. It's not something new, but it seems to be something coming back. People can't be doing internships. Internships are normally unpaid or low paid. It just seems to be an attempt to push a sort of slavery once again. People who are on universal credit, push them into employment where they will work for free, basically. Anyway, guys, I want to move on to some of you probably heard this, maybe some of you have not. This is a wonderful monologue by James O'Brien today about a good friend of the show, 30p Lee Anderson. Now, for anyone who doesn't know who 30p Lee Anderson is and why he's called 30p Lee Anderson is a Tory MP who used to be a Labour councillor, as far as I know. He was a member of the Labour Party anyway. And in 2019, I'm sure it was 2019, he ran as a Tory MP and he won his seat. Now, of course, he won it on the back of Get Brexit Done and Boris Johnson's coattails. And he's been making a bit of a name for himself. Now, I think he's going to lose his seat at the next election because of the general feeling towards the Tories, which would be great news. But I have a feeling that what he's doing at the moment is creating a sort of profile for himself so that when he does lose his seat, he'll be well known and he'll be given, I don't know, a job on Gammon Brexit News or Talk TV or something like that. Or he'll get involved in some other activity. You're not going to be hearing the last of Lee Anderson. Now, the 30p part comes in where I think he frequents a food bank from time to time, and he was explaining how food banks are wonderful. First of all, the Tories have boosted the numbers of food banks over the last 13 years. But he was saying how, people can come in here, they can learn how to cook, they can make a meal with just 30p. And, make a meal with 30p. This is uplifting. This is aspirational. From a party that has driven people into poverty, cut their benefits, driven people to take their lives, unfortunately. It's so desperate, the universal credit and the welfare system, and how the DWP has abandoned so many people. But he's received the nickname 30p Lee. Before we get to that, we have a super chat from Richard Turner. It's a scary time when we all only one bad government decision from being dragged into poverty. We're all only one bad government decision from being dragged into poverty. Yes. You could be middle class one day, and something like what Liz Truss did she messed up along with Kwasi Kwarteng and drove up interest rates, causing the central bank to increase interest rates. That turns people from middle class into working class overnight, and then people who are working class, struggling to make ends meet, and then you have these energy prices rising, rents rising, and these are things that are beyond your control. And instead of getting real support from the government, you get, condescending comments on Twitter, and no real support. Thanks for that, Richard. We have from Nickelodeon81. Thanks so much for that super chat. Do we have to live with this self-destructive Tory party for for 2 more years? Look, it depends on, I think, maximum 2 years, but I think there's going to be a general election pretty soon. Rishi Sunak is not delivering the type of support from the public and voters that the Tories had hoped he would. They didn't want Boris Johnson in because they thought he would damage the party even further. Liz Truss had to go as well, and they had hoped that Rishi Sunak would be their knight in shining armor, but it's not working out that way. And things are going to get worse this year, and I think there's going to be more and more pressure for a general election. So I don't think it's going to be 2 years. Thanks for that, Super Chat Nickelodeon. Gareth McDonald, thanks so much, Gareth. UBI arguments are similar to free school meals now. Folks start saying things like, oh, well, what if we don't need it? Personally, rich, poor, it doesn't matter. If you pay in, then you should benefit. Yes. It's need to have, but the free school meals is a perfect example of that, where just give a free school meal to everyone, even if they don't need it. It's better that somebody gets a meal than somebody who doesn't. If you have a means-tested system, you're going to miss people. If you have it, well, you have to reach a certain threshold. Somebody may one day, that week they earn, if they're on, I don't know, on a 0-hour contract, they end up earning a little bit more that week, and they push themselves out above the threshold, and they're not able to get that free school meal, and that child goes hungry that day. It's better to have something universal. It doesn't cost the earth. And once again, as I said on numerous occasions, when it comes to people, it's regarded as a cost. When it comes to everything else, it's investment. Anyway, let's hear what James Bryan had to say about 30p Lee.
MP who sort of spends his entire life. He first came to prominence after being filmed lying. He set up a con. Have you seen this? Have I ever played this to you? So he was being accompanied around Ashfield by a journalist and a film crew, and he offered to knock on a random door to find out what a member of the public thought about him or about issues.
Conservative Party, how you doing? I recognise you. It's Steve, isn't it? Yeah, I recognise you.
But he forgot when he went to talk to his mate behind the door to set up this completely bogus and fraudulent interview. He forgot that he still had the microphone on that had been supplied by the film crew. So they actually recorded him setting up the con.
Okay, you know who I am. You know I'm the candidate, but not a friend. All right. I'm at staff car park. Have a quick look. Yeah. All right, I'll see you in a minute.
Which subsequently...
This was amazing. And it was the Daily Mail, the Daily frigging Mail that actually covered it and exposed Lee Anderson. And now he still has support, but let's continue.
Fell apart in his hands. That was an early indication of the kind of calibre and competence of politician that Lee Anderson would prove to be. So he was in the news a bit yesterday for sticking his oar in to the, people using food banks are all swinging the lead or not managing their money properly. And in order to prove this point, he elected, I'm going to take this story from the Daily Mail, because the Daily Mail is normally so far up the fundament of Conservative politicians that they wouldn't be able to tell you whether it was night or day. And what he did yesterday was release a photograph of a young female colleague, a parliamentary staffer. He has the 7th highest turnover of staff in the House of Commons on this. I don't know how interesting you find that, but there are quite a lot of MPs. To have the 7th highest turnover of staff is very interesting.
Now, before we get to the point that James is making here, also the question, you have to beg the question, did he ask her permission to take the photo? You can find the photo online of his staffer. Or was there some sort of pressure? Your boss comes around. Can you imagine in any other situation where your boss would come around and say, can I take a picture of you? Because I want to post it on social media in order to piss off people I disagree with. Like, how would a normal person's response? This must be in breach of some sort of employment regulations. I know MPs are generally above the law, but the people they employ, I don't think you're allowed to do this, or you shouldn't be allowed to do it. Or maybe this is part of the the bonfire of regulations that the Brexiteers want to push through, that Tory MPs are allowed to take photos of people without their consent or force them into consenting.
He tweeted out the salary details of his staffer, a young woman in her 20s, and offered up the claim that this proved that people didn't need to use food banks. She is single. So this is what he wrote. Katie works for me. She is single and earns less than 30k. Rents a room for £775 per calendar month in central London. Has student debt, £120 a month on travelling to work. Saves money every month. Goes on foreign holidays and does not need to use a food bank. Katie makes my point really well. I mean, she doesn't, is the first point to make. If you are, I mean, we spoke to Karen yesterday, whose husband was killed in a motorcycle accident 4 years ago. They have 4 children. They were doing fine before he died. Now they are struggling. So quite what the existence of a single woman living in a rented room in London has to say about the experiences of a nurse and mother of 4, a widowed mother of 4 who is also a nurse, is beyond me. But it's not beyond 30p Lee, because he adds, Katie makes my point really well. I don't know that anyone would be able to work out precisely what his point is, beyond the idea that anybody using food banks is either lying or behaving fecklessly. But what he did to this young woman, by using her essentially as a human shield, is that he turned the spotlight onto her. Her boss has announced to the world that the details of her life are now fit for public consumption. So inevitably, many people, both on Twitter and then beyond, dived into the details of her life, and they discovered, among other things, that she attended a school where the fees are, I think, in excess of £30,000, that her father was a brigadier in the army and is now the chief operating officer of York Minster. He was recently the director of operations for all army recruiting and initial training. He received a CBE. I can tell you what her mother does for a living. She's the chief executive of a charity in Yorkshire. I'm getting all of this from the Daily Mail, lest you want to lie to yourself and claim that it's some sort of lefty conspiracy. And of course, a school where tuition starts at £11,300 per term suggests that this young woman, this, to my mind, blameless young woman, is not really a poster girl for living on a pittance. So that has rather blown up in his face, as you would perhaps expect. I don't know, really. They pulled a whip from Bridgen, didn't they, for completely detaching himself from observable reality. I don't think Lee Anderson has gone down that particular rabbit hole, but you imagine what it's like.
Not yet. Not yet.
Like being a Conservative whip. I'm not suggesting anyone should have any sympathy for them. They made this bed. But how do you deal with a backbench MP who's doxing his own staff, insulting everybody who uses a food bank, offending every nurse in the country, and then challenging members of the public to boxing matches?
This last part was, this is unbelievable. Lee Anderson, there's a picture of him online of him with his fists up, challenging members of the public, probably Steve Bray, our friend of the show, no Brexit man, challenging members of the public to a boxing match. As James says, you need to have a little bit of sympathy, not too much sympathy for the Tory whip. It's like, in the whip's office, they like, okay, wait, did you hear about Lee? What did Lee do? He's been challenging people to a boxing match. What? Bring him in here. Again, we need to give him a dressing down. Dr. Johan, thanks so much for that super chat. Very kind of you. Thank you so much. We have another from Alistair once again. Alistair, thanks. Chat, just a question. If you can visit your local hospital to see what the mainstream media is doing, are saying is true about the NHS, is to collapse posted on social media. It's I know there is a YouTuber, I think it's Indie Truck Davy, who has visited a number of sites to speak with people. I haven't seen his videos, but that's what I heard he was going to do. Thanks for that super chat. She's single, but probably has parents. Hope 30p loses his seat and has to use a food bank. I have a fear he's not going to be in such dire straits. I think he's going to be given some job in the media. I don't know. He seems to be preparing himself, building up, a sort of following online, building up some sort of reputation. Somebody said a cooking show, maybe. What is Was it really a staffer, though? It was just a stock photo off the web. I know that's a possibility. No, I think it was a staffer. But the fact that, you would use somebody's image, even with their consent, but, Lee Anderson is your boss. And he says, I want to take a picture of you. Or he's already taken a picture of you and he says, I'm going to post this online. Maybe he didn't even ask. He said, I posted a picture of you online. Do you have a problem with it? He's your boss. You're probably there because you want to further your career in politics. You're not going to probably say anything. So, well, yeah, I better say, yeah, sure, go ahead, Lee. Yeah, it doesn't, to hell with the consequences I'm going to receive for this. But then, it probably goes with the territory. If you're going to become if you're going to be an aide to an MP, it's probably better to be with somebody like, I don't know, who? I don't know who. Keir Starmer than Lee Anderson. And then Keir Starmer this week said that he'd prefer to sit down and watch a football match with Piers Morgan over Jeremy Corbyn. Like, I'm not a fan of Jeremy Corbyn's politics, like his approach to Brexit, okay? But Jeremy Corbyn, I think, is a decent individual. I think he's somebody who actually cares about working class people. He cares about people who are struggling at the moment. I think he really messed up over Brexit, but I'm not going to go into that. But, Jeremy Corbyn, of course, there's a bit of ego there. He wanted to become prime minister, but I think, deep down, he's a decent individual. Piers Morgan, not a bit. Piers Morgan, the complete opposite. Scumbag. Okay. Richard Turner, thanks so much for that super chat. I'd have more issue posting my salary and outgoing. Yeah, and posting is very private information, and I think there's some there has to be some law broken here. Posting personal information about somebody, and you being an MP. But just about Jeremy Corbyn, look, once again, for Brexit, I was really critical, but as an individual, I think he's a decent man. Piers Morgan, nowhere near that. The things that Piers Morgan has done, in the early days, phone hacking, things like this, really scumbag behaviour. Pierced helmet, Morgan. Anyway. Guys, we're about halfway through the stream, so I just want to take a short comedy break, and we'll be back in just a moment with more serious stuff.
Hiya, I'm Bruce Fumi. I'm an entertainer that makes YouTube videos about the people, places and events in Scottish history. Now, last night I received this invitation in an email. The Prime Minister invites Bruce Fumi to a reception to celebrate Scottish culture at 10 Downing Street on Burns Night, Wednesday the 25th of January 2023. Please arrive at 16:15, ends 17:45. RSVP and an email address. Now, I responded by saying, of course he does, because the Prime Minister invites me to Downing Street at the last moment all the time. This morning, I received a return email assuring me that this was a genuine invitation, providing me with a switchboard number at Downing Street and some security details. So, here's my RSVP. Pay the nurses, you billionaire Tory twat!
Well said. Well said. Wonderful. Yes, do pay the nurses, you Tory twat. Wonderful. Gareth, thanks so much for that super chat. Comparison again, asylum seekers and universal credit claimants. It's always one size fits all, isn't it? It's one of these. If one of these folks is a crook, then they're all. For fuck's sake, yeah. Unfortunately, this is the approach that many politicians take to this situation, I'm afraid to say. Thanks so much, Gareth. FSM is the dog. Can we stop the idea that Starmer is a lefty? Yeah, can we stop with it? Yeah, look, he's center left, center right, somewhere in the center anyway. he's better than the Tories. Let's put it like that. But anything is better than the Tories. The bar is set very low. Very, very, disappointed with Keir Starmer on a number of things. He made many promises. He's going back on them. Look, I think it's unfair to judge him on what was said at the 2019 general election manifesto, the manifesto of 2019. People have been complaining about him, going back on the 2019 manifesto. The next election, you need a new manifesto. That's normal. The situation has changed enormously since 2019. But you would still hope the vision would be the same: protect the NHS, create jobs, improve education, provide housing for people. These are the basic things of the Labour Party. You would hope that they would remain intact. Anyway, thanks so much for that super chat. Great Uncle Horsa, thanks so much for that. Steve Bray should challenge 30p to a game of Scrabble. That would make Anderson sweat. Wonderful. It would. Well, he'd do it. He'd be like a pigeon. He just poop on the board and then strut around as if he won the game. David, thanks so much for that super chat. Max, it's me. I've got people all around Scotland looking into the situation in Scotland's NHS. Not as bad as the mainstream media are making out. Thanks for that. I didn't want to say too much about it until I was sure that you had done that. So that's great work, because what the BBC in particular are trying to do is say that, well, in Scotland it's just as bad as in England, and you have people who are looking into that and seeing that, well, it's actually not the case. There are, of course, problems. There are problems all over the UK and in Ireland as well. Problems in Ireland have existed for a long time, and I think there's a problem of investment in staff, and there's a lack of beds. There's always a critical shortage of beds, which needs to be addressed. But the narrative, of course, is Nicola Sturgeon is running down the NHS. She's in charge of healthcare. But of course, I've said on a number of occasions, if Scotland is suffering a staffing shortage, there's very little it can do about it, because it's a consequence of a Brexit that it voted against. FSM is the dog. Thanks so much for that. Damned by faint praise. I think with Starmer, what needs to happen is he needs to have some sort of vision for the future, for the Labour Party. It's not so much saying it's not enough just to say that we're not the Conservatives. That might be enough to win the election. But if you want to run the country, you need to have a vision. And if you want to win the next election after this one, the following one, you need to have a vision. And the Labour Party don't really have a vision at the moment. I understand they don't really need one, because the Tories are crashing and burning, but the people deserve a vision. Thanks for that. Anyway, moving on to levelling up. Jeremy Hunt poised to approve £300 million support package for British Steel. So it says Jeremy Hunt is poised to approve £300 million financial support package for British Steel, designed to cut its carbon footprint and avoid thousands of jobs being lost. The Chancellor is expected to tell the UK's biggest steelmaker, which employs about 4,000 people, within days that he has given the green light to deliver the delivery of £300 million in instalments over the next few years. The package is designed to fund a project to replace the company's blast furnaces at the Scunthorpe with greener electric arc furnaces, the Treasury has said. So this is a very good idea. At the moment, a big problem for British Steel is that they're using outdated technology, and it's really expensive. If they replace it with arc furnaces, it's much cleaner and it's much more energy efficient. and it can bring down the price of steel, because if you're using outdated methods, it's more expensive. If you upgrade to newer methods, it's going to be much cheaper. And it seems to be most steel produced in Europe is using arc furnaces, not blast furnaces. More carrots, Max. When are they going to wake up? British Steel or Indian Steel? And this is the problem: is British Steel has been pretty much sold off. British Steel was brought out of liquidation in 2020 by the Chinese group Jingyi. It is understood the government funding is contingent on Jingyi committing to retaining jobs and investing at least £1 billion in British Steel by 2030. Okay. Maybe this is a bit of a fly in the ointment here. So this is dependent on the foreign company, the Chinese company, maintaining the industry. But if the foreign company, like what happened with British Volt, if they feel that, well, there's no real market here, they're going to pull out. They're going to reduce the investment. And you know what's happened since Brexit is investment has decreased, and no company wants to be the outlier. They don't want to be like, we're going to be the ones who are going to invest in Britain when nobody else is. You know, you need to be able to make money. That's why you invest. But if they feel that there are barriers to trade, if it's more expensive to produce in Britain than it is in Europe, then they're going to produce in Europe. Yes, they'd be happy to get this £300 million of investment, but as we saw here, it's dependent on the company putting forward the cash. Shaps and Gove estimate that closing both blast furnaces could cost in the region of £300 to £640 million, as well as up to £1 billion in extra cost to the government in decommissioning and other liabilities. Talks between the government and British Steel began in October, led by former Business Secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg. Oh my God! It's like, why don't we go back to coke, using coke to make steel, or wood or something like that, you know? My God. Any taxpayer-funded deal could spark criticism among Conservative MPs skeptical of Chinese ownership of key British businesses. Why are these people so concerned about foreign ownership now? Like, how many British businesses have been sold off to foreign companies over the last number of decades? Not years, but decades. And now they're complaining, we don't want the Chinese running any of our businesses. This sort of, gets me thinking about people like Ian Duncan Smith. Ian Duncan Smith is very critical of the Chinese operating in Britain. Yeah, once again, steel should be nationalised. It should be in public ownership. It's a very important company to have as part of your economy. It's a very important part of the economy. It's strategic. If you were to go to war tomorrow and you needed to build tanks, you needed steel, what if the company decided, well, we're not actually going to give you the steel because it's against our interests? These should be under public ownership, like infrastructure, like ports. I was shocked this year to realize that many of the ports are run by private companies. How come people aren't talking about this? These companies can say tomorrow we're going to close down. If it's state run, you're in control. British Steel spokesperson told Sky News, which first reported the aid package, Jingyi are committed to a long-term future, but we also require the UK government to provide the necessary support, policies, frameworks to back our drive to a clean, green and sustainable company. This is like the company asking for money, a handout. We'll implement something that we would normally do anyway, but if you can give us some money, that'd be great. Oh my God. Really, the Tories need to be removed from power. You need to have a party in power who actually care about industry, nationalising industry where necessary. this is extremely expensive, but these companies know that if they can get the taxpayer to pay for it, then it saves them a huge amount of cash. But the big concern, of course, is it viable? Because, you don't want to give the company loads of money and then they say, oh, actually, we're not going to produce the steel here. Thanks for the money, though. Anyway, moving on. Guess who was in Davos?
And Keir Starmer, leader of the opposition of the United Kingdom.
Taking his place on the global stage, the leader of the opposition.
Once again, this is insane. At the World Economic Forum, Keir Starmer was there representing Britain, not Rishi Sunak. How is this possible?
Today was Sir Keir Starmer's day at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and he came with a message.
I think there's a sense here that the UK has drifted, is not part of the global conversation. We want to reverse that, and it's very important that we do, because investment, foreign direct investment, has gone down dramatically under this government. I do think the Prime Minister should have been here. I'm very happy to be here as an ambassador for UK PLC.
This is a massive win for the Labour Party. Yeah, we're representing Britain because the Tories have abandoned it.
Like it or not, Davos is where you come to drum up investment. The PM may not be here, but his business secretary was.
There are a lot of businesses here. There's a lot of business to be done for British jobs.
So instead of actually the Prime Minister going, they sent the con man instead.
Not to be here would literally to be saying we don't care about that investment, send it elsewhere. And I think that would be crazy. Anyone watching this who has a job and wants a better, perhaps better paid job, investment is the way that we win that. And Britain's brilliant.
But you've put up barriers to trade. How are you supposed to attract investment if you're saying, yeah, you can come to Britain and invest, but if you want to sell that stuff outside, I'm sorry, we put up barriers to trade. Why? Well, because we needed to keep racists and bigots happy.
At it, we need to be here to make sure that we do lead the world.
But while Mr. Shapps tried to bang that drum, it wasn't resounding as much as usual. One of the long-standing traditions here at Davos is that towards the end of the summit, the British contingent, the business leaders as they call themselves, meet for a special lunch in that hotel over there. Now, I cannot remember another one of these lunches going back a decade or more, which was quite so sombre. A lot of people saying Britain just simply isn't there in the room at this forum. It needs to be doing more, even as the US is spending billions. Indeed, so far the UK has no response to the Inflation Reduction Act, in which America is splurging on green investment. So much for building back better.
The last thing is stop worrying about criminology. It's difficult to work out what's going to happen in UK politics, let alone in the Kremlin.
Which brings us to this man. The ex-PM was the other big British name in Davos, here for a panel about Ukraine. Not that he wanted to stop and talk about it.
Sky News here.
How are you? Now,
Tell us what brings you to Prime Minister.
Hello.
Even while trying to keep a low profile.
He was looking for a fridge, the poor guy. He was like, okay, we're in a very cold place, but surely they have a fridge in this area. Let me get to the damn fridge.
Boris Johnson still somehow eclipsed the government.
Should Rishi Sunak really be here?
Hello.
What an absolute joke. So, Rishi Sunak doesn't turn up. Instead, he sends the con man, Grant Shapps. And then all of that is upstaged by Boris Johnson, who had no reason to be there. Yes, he was invited to talk about Ukraine. But Boris Johnson has no influence over the UK government now. He's a backbencher. Boris Johnson, I'm sure, was there to promote Boris Johnson. He has a book coming out. So, great opportunity, go to Davos and promote myself. My God. And oh, God. It's disgraceful. Moving on. Sticking with the Labour Party, though. Labour's Wes Streeting says reform is not a conservative word. Wes Streeting turns 40 this weekend, so he has been steering clear of the debate on whether cake should be allowed in the workplace. You caught me red-handed, the Shadow Health Secretary last Tom in my office has brought in shortbread for my birthday. Instead, he spent much of the week defending plans for change in the NHS, with many on the left concerned they will lead to more privatization. Keir Starmer has joined the right in calling for reform of the NHS. The veteran left-winger Diane Abbott tweeted, "We all know what that means." But Streeting is unflinching. The left surrenders the word reform to the Conservatives at our peril, he says. Why was the Labour Party set up more than 100 years ago? It wasn't to defend the status quo. It was to reform the way our society works, the way our economy works, to build public services that work to change things. Reform is not a Conservative word. In recent elections, the left has given a lot of people the impression the answer to everything is to pour more money in. Of course, investment is needed in the NHS, but to ask any patient about their miserable experience is partly about culture and systems. That's got to change too. No. Look, I'm not an expert on the NHS, okay? I'm pretty sure that Wes Streeting has a much better understanding of the NHS than I do. But why is the NHS in such a state at the moment? It's because of the Conservative Party, of undercutting it, underfunding it, not maintaining funding with inflation, bringing in private companies to provide services, instructing the NHS to provide to funnel money into the private sector. You know, the NHS doesn't have the money it needs, and whatever money it does have, it's spending it on trying to maintain staff. It's struggling to do that. It's spending money on private services. It shouldn't be doing that. You know, the reform he's talking about should start from the top. In a sense, if you want to say the NHS has been reformed, it has been reformed over the last numbers of years. It has to be unreformed. It needs to go back to basics. It needs to go back to providing a service to the public paid for by the taxpayer, and not providing private services, not funneling money into the private sector. You know, there are stories of nurses working for the NHS through agencies who are paid thousands of pounds a month. Much more than the average nurse would be earning. Why? Because they can't get the staff. But they need the staff, so they have to pay over the odds. If it had the right funding from the beginning, if it had access to the staff it needs, it wouldn't have to do that. He's talking about reforming, but that's reforming it from a position where it's on its knees. No, it needs reinvestment. It needs to go back to basics. Fixing up the flipping IT systems too. Reform like it's fine. Reform being used to private profit is not. See, £40 an hour for agency nurses. My God. And they said on question time, GP appointments cost £100. A&E consultants consultation costs £300 per patient. In my view, the NHS is already lost. It's too late. Get Labour in for the next two parliaments, and if we continue voting for left governments after that, then maybe we'll get the NHS again. I'm afraid so, Thomas. The NHS costs money. That's why people pay taxes, not to hear to heat some tax dodgers' horse stables. That's what it's about. You know, a sort of social safety net in regards to health. That's what it's about. Gareth, thanks so much for that super chat. Reconstituted is the word you're looking for, Max. Yes. It needs resuscitation. It needs to go back to the way it was before the Tories. You know, the opinion of and this is really what I don't understand, why the Labour Party aren't pushing this. They could be saying, look at waiting lists before the Conservatives took over. Look at investment before the Conservatives took over. Look at the numbers of nurses and doctors before the Conservatives took over. Let's go back to the way it was before. A bit of nostalgia for the good old days. That's what they should be selling. But maybe I'm too far left on this. I believe that the healthcare system should be run by the state. Now, many people say, well, why don't we have something like, okay, we can't have that, let's have something like Europe. But the problem in Europe is it's highly regulated. And regulation is a dirty word, unfortunately, in British politics. Even on the left, or maybe not so much on the left, but in the centre, it's become a toxic word. The Tories have been able to use it as a tool to convince people to vote for Brexit. We need to get rid of all these regulations. Regulations are considered something negative. Health and safety regulations, in your workplace to protect the workers. These are necessary. These were hard won. The Tories want to get rid of these. Labour should be pushing for the end of first past the post. Probably not at the next election, but it should be part of their manifesto. In the sense that I think they should put it in place once they have won. I don't think it's going to be a vote winner. It's going to be a vote winner with people who understand the problems of first past the post. They should bring in PR. Should bring in PR. But unfortunately, many people don't understand how PR works and don't understand the advantages of PR. So it's very easy to confuse the public and convince them, no, don't vote for the Labour Party because they're going to destroy democracy or something. Anyway, so I am concerned about when they talk about regulations. Anyway, moving on. In Scotland, Westminster block on Scotland's gender recognition bill may be gift to the SNP. Says here, I honestly can't tell if I'm angry or exhausted, probably a mix, says Arabelle, one of the group of young trans Scots who shared their experience with MSPs last year as the Holyrood Parliament considered the gender recognition reform bill. This is important to remember that this is not something new. It's been going back and forth in the Scottish Parliament for some time. The group's frustration and wariness was palpable on Wednesday morning following the announcement from Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack that he would block the bill, which simplifies the system by which transgender individuals can change their gender and lower the age of application to 16. I can't even be angry, it's just stupid, said 18-year-old Sid. The UK government are making the case, a great case for independence. They're showing a complete lack of respect towards both trans people and Scotland. MSPs said, who sat through the day of fraught and often emotional debate in the Scottish Parliament at the end of last year, including unprecedented early hours sittings and protests inside the chamber, were watching events unfold in Westminster on Wednesday afternoon. Jack formally blocked the law that would allow Scotland, the first country in the UK, to introduce a system of self-identification for those wanting to change gender. The phrasing used on social media by SNP politicians following Jack's announcement was telling. Whether you like the bill or not, whether you like the bill itself, this is a denial of democracy, a phrase first coined by Nicola Sturgeon after last October's Supreme Court ruling that Holyrood could not legislate for a second referendum without Westminster's approval. Now, yeah, I think this is going to benefit the SNP. Well, not so much the SNP, but it's going to benefit the independence movement, because people who are even against the bill, who are pro-indie, are going to be looking, not everyone, there are some crazy people as well, but people who are not SNP supporters, but they are pro-independence, are looking at this and saying, this is terrible for devolution. This is nothing to do with Westminster. And it's interesting that Alistair Jack has not provided the legal advice he's received, explaining why he should use a Section 35 to block this legislation. He hasn't said this is the legal advice, and we can look at the legal advice and look at it critically and understand whether he was right to do this or not. He's claiming yes, he has, because it interferes with equality legislation, but that hasn't been guaranteed. That hasn't been proven. Look, I've said before that the Tories don't care about the union. Okay, if you're a unionist listening to this, I know it says Conservative and Unionist Party. They don't care about the union. Look at what happened what's happening with Northern Ireland. The Brexiteers had a choice between staying in the single market and the customs union, which was not a requirement of Brexit, but staying within the single market and the customs union, and keeping Northern Ireland within that framework as well. No, they wanted a harder Brexit. It meant sacrificing Northern Ireland. To hell with Northern Ireland. To hell with the union. They understood, and they still understand, that Brexit is extremely unpopular in Scotland, but keep pushing ahead with Brexit. Is it going to continue to drive a wedge between Holyrood and Westminster? To hell with the consequences of that. We want our Brexit. So don't try and convince me that Brexiteers care about the union. When it comes to the union or Brexit, Brexit wins every time. And the Conservatives don't really have any skin in the game in Scotland. They understand that they're a dying breed. They understand that whatever support they have is diminishing. It's really a race for second or third place between the Labour Party and the Conservatives in Scotland. So, they're not going to upend the SNP unless there's some drastic situation or a massive scandal. But they've been trying all sorts of excrement for a long time, and nothing has really stuck. They come up with, and their friends in the media in Scotland. The BBC is run by London. There isn't an independent BBC in Scotland. So, you look at some of the reports, it's very pro-Westminster. And I think it's very important for people to differentiate between England and Westminster. It's the SNP and many people in the independence movement are anti-Westminster, not anti-English. There are anti-English people, of course they exist, in the same way that there are English people who are anti-Scottish. But the main problem the SNP and the independence movement have is with Westminster, because Westminster doesn't care about devolution at the moment. Anyway, wanted to move on. Related to the cost of living, this is a story in Scotland itself, but it's replicated all over.
We're in the depths of winter. It's freezing outside. But for some, being inside is almost as bad.
I hope I'm not going to be here in 5 years' time. A lot of people try and tell me to go down the homeless route and see if that helps, but it's put my kids through that. If I don't get out, how is my health going to impact? Is it going to end up that I'm not going to be fit enough to be here for my kids?
It's becoming more common for homes across Scotland to be riddled with mould. The conditions are dangerous, but in many cases, there's no escape.
5 years I thought this. I've been to every person that I can think possible who I thought I could help, and still nothing.
These are the stories of two single mothers and their children who live in social housing. They say the only people who can help them aren't, and they're running out of time. Louise Coyle's home is as damp as they come. But it also reeks of bleach. Black spores are on almost every wall, door, window and carpet. But no matter how hard she scrubs, the mother of three is fighting a losing battle.
Coming through the carpets, onto flooring, onto beds, mattresses, wardrobes, chest of drawers. And I feel bad because my kids are asking, Mum, can we decorate this? Can we do this? I'm sorry, children, but no. And I would love to be able to do it. I'd love for them to go and pick wallpaper and paint and a nice carpet and rug. but I don't see the point because it's all getting destroyed.
A big problem as well is that if mold, I'm not an expert on this, I have some mold in my own home, which is a problem, but the problem with it is that if once it gets into the walls, you need special treatment to get rid of it. Spraying bleach, wiping it down will get rid of it for a couple of weeks, but then it's going to come back.
Louise's children, Erin and Jade, sleep in the living room because their bedroom isn't safe.
Go to bed, hardly sleep at night, worrying, and then I'm back up 2 minutes later again. What is my kids breathing in? They're breathing it in on a daily basis anyway. A cross between bleach, dampness and all the rest of it. They're not sleeping in their bedrooms because of it. My 11-year-old is suffering health problems through asthma, breathing problems, respiratory. So no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to put her in a room that's got that. The only place that seems safe is the living room.
I mean, how difficult is that as a mother to know that your kids are breathing this in all the time?
It's very difficult. I feel I'm putting them in this situation. I know I'm not, but as a parent, I just feel, what more can I do? I'm constantly making phone calls.
I think Anita says a very interesting thing here as well. Many more homes will be mouldy because people save on heating this winter. Yes, because they're not able to maintain, and the big problem for mold is that if the temperature rises and then drops and then rises and then drops, the mold loves this. It helps it spread. You try to keep the place ventilated and maintain a level of temperature, but it's extremely difficult if you're cutting, if you're trying to save on energy bills.
Ask him to come out, and nothing gets done. So what more can I feel I do as a parent?
Every room in the house has been impacted by the damp.
I feel the clothes do stink of dampness. I feel I'm washing clothes on a daily basis, that I've washed clothes and put them by. If I've maybe not had it on, say, for a week, 2 weeks, I've got to put that back in the washing again to wash it, to wear it, because I don't like the smell. I can even sometimes feel it in my hand, my skin. I know that sounds terrible, but I do. I just feel it's in the air all the time, and I feel yucky.
Louise says she has spent close to £8,000 trying to fix the mould and damp conditions.
I know it might not seem a lot to other people out there, but it's a lot to me. When I'm a single parent with 3 children, it is a lot. I've not got the money to keep replacing.
You obviously sleep with the mould and the dampness in the room with you. Do you worry about the impact it has on your health?
Yep, 110%. I'm feeling more tired all the time. My eyes are nipping constantly. Between cleaning the house, between the dampness, between the no sleeping at night, because my head's doing overdrives, wondering, what am I going to do the next day? What am I going to wake up to? Am I going to pull something out my wardrobe that's going to be wrecked again? I'm losing everything, and I'm just drained. I don't want to be here anymore.
In Scotland, the number of reports by tenants to councils and housing associations about mould or dampness has risen by 1/5 in 2 years, according to a Freedom of Information request by the Sunday Post. Figures obtained from 22 councils show almost 14,500 reports of mould or dampness were lodged last year, compared with just over 12,000 in the year before, an increase of 19%.
It can be fatal if you are exposed to heavy levels of mould over a long period of time. And the problem is that we're not acting fast enough, so the problem grows exponentially and has not just immediate but also long-term consequences on health.
Dr. Poonam Krishan is a GP working across central Scotland. She says mould is far more dangerous than many are led to believe.
It gives off spores. These spores then fly off and they can lodge into our airways and our lungs. And what happens is, over a period of time, people will have symptoms that can range from things like irritated eyes, itching, runny eyes, to congestion of the sinuses, repeated chest infections. But if you have underlying health conditions like lung conditions or heart conditions, it can be potentially fatal.
And that's why it needs to be dealt with, and it needs to be a case where councils get extra funding in order to restore these properties, and if it's very expensive. You need to rip plaster off walls in some cases. The properties need to be, of course, people need to be moved out. They need to be put in other accommodation. The walls have to be stripped. They have to be treated with chemicals, and then restored. But that takes time and it takes money. And many councils are struggling at the moment to raise funds because of inflation and because central government has less. So in Scotland in particular, central government has less money because it gets a lot of money from Westminster, and Westminster is not interested in providing Scotland with the money it needs. And Scotland, is not able to raise taxes like Westminster can. It can't borrow money in the same way. It can't raise income tax, for example. So its hands are tied, like other devolved administrations. So these problems need to be dealt with. They need to be dealt with as soon as possible, because the longer you leave it, the more expensive it becomes. Guys, we're almost at the end. I just wanted to cover one final story before we finish, which is an interesting story about China. It says here, the last generation, young Chinese people vowing not to have children. So this was, you're probably familiar with the one-child policy that was part and parcel of the communist regime in in China. Sorry, I was on the Scotland story. Don't edit that out. Okay. If the communist regime in China for many years since Mao Zedong, but in order to reduce the population, they brought in the one-child policy, so families could not have more than one child. And what happened was it created a situation where most families had only one son, because they wanted to pass on their legacy, to pass on their money, or they wanted the child to inherit, and it was better if it was a son than a daughter, because the son would be able to. I don't remember exactly the reason for that. But what's happened now since the pandemic is that many young people are not having children, and they call themselves the last generation, which is very interesting. I just want to read a little bit from this. Alistair, before we finish. Alistair, thanks so much for that super chat. Max, it might be cheaper to build new housing, as some are 1950s builds. That makes perfect sense, because to retrofit, to restore some of these buildings from the 1950s, it's cheaper just to build new complexes, new apartments, and build them with new materials so they would last much longer. Because if you have an old building from the 1950s, you may be able to change a few things in it, but you'd be constantly going back to do repairs, and it's much more expensive. Well said. Yeah, very, very valid point there. Communism for Scotland. My dad's house built in thanks so much, Freddie B. My dad's house built in 1955, very damp, trying to get grants for him as he's 70 and retired. Walls are peeling off. Hopefully get it fixed for him. Best of luck with that. There should be something, if it's a very old building, it may be protected in some way, so there should be some grants to restore, to help do some of these repairs. But I imagine the older the building, it's the more expensive it is. Hey Max, where in Ireland are you, buddy? Says Alan. Actually, I'm from Longford originally, but now I live in Italy, which is very strange, I know. But I'll get into that another time. And an Irish guy living in Italy talking about Brexit. I think I'm quite unique in that, on that front. In my area in Scotland, the council are just starting a contract for new doors, or triple glazing, to help with heating and damp problems. That's great to hear, Derek. Just back to this story here. So take any young person, any young woman in urban China. Talk to any young woman in urban China about the prospects of having children, and the chances are they're not keen. It costs too much to give kids a decent life. The stuff they teach in school is propaganda. So I want to send them. So I'd want to send them to an international school or abroad, but I can't afford that, says Kong Kong, a 26-year-old researcher who swears she will not have children. So once again, this is following from the one-child policy. I was going to say the Tory government. I'm very confused tonight. The the Chinese government decided, okay, we're going to end this policy because we need to boost the population. But the pandemic arrived and that changed many people's approach. This week, the Chinese government announced the country had entered an era of negative population growth after figures show a historic drop in the number of people for the first time since the Great Famine between 1958 and 1961. The population fell by 850,000 to 1.41 billion people in 2022, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. But unlike the famine, whose effects were temporary, scholars say this marks the start of a long period of population decline. Alarmed by the country's increasing low fertility rate, Chinese demographers campaigned to scrap the one-child policy for more than a decade before the government finally ended it in 2015. But by that time, it was too late to reverse the trend. Since the 1990s, China's total fertility rate, the average number of children born to a woman over her lifetime, has declined to below replacement level of 2.1. The figure is 1.3 in 2020 and fell to 1.15 in 2021. Fearing the adverse effects of an aging population coupled with a shortage of working-age people, the Chinese government allowed couples to have 2 children in 2015 and further eased the birth limit to 3 in 2021. For years, studies have found that the rising cost of bringing up children and the lack of welfare provisions to be the main reasons behind China's low fertility rate. In recent years, the government has begun to offer incentives such as tax breaks, subsidies for children, and longer parental leave, while discouraging abortions. An academic even controversially suggested that social welfare and pensions should be linked to the number of children people have, but those measures have failed to trigger a baby boom. Look, I think it's important to respect people as well. The main driver here is we need a bigger population for 2 reasons. One is to keep the wheels of industry moving because we need workers, and the other is to pay taxes to prop up a system where there is an older population. Healthcare needs to be funded by workers, and we need people to pay into a pension fund, which is paying pensions to the older generation. I've always found this sort of weird because shouldn't we respect people for being people? Shouldn't we respect them as individuals and not just as numbers to help grease the wheels of a capitalist system? Even though it's a communist country, well, it's not that communist. But I've always found it interesting. But many people are, saying that, particularly in China, we can't afford it. It's become very difficult to have. If you want the child to have a good education, that we have to send them abroad. That's really expensive, and the government trying to force people to do it really backfires. Of course, the solution to this is probably automation. A lot of jobs are going to be replaced by machines in the future. So I don't think it's necessary to have such a massive working numbers of workers, because we're seeing, AI, robotics, and other technologies replace a lot of workers, not just in manufacturing, but also in services. So you don't need a huge workforce. And second, when it comes to the older generation, if you need to bring people in, then you can allow people to come in from other countries. So I don't know the immigration laws in China. Is it difficult to move there? You need to incentivize people to move to the country if it's a concern about having enough young people to contribute to the tax system in order to contribute to the welfare state. I don't know. It just seems to be a 20th century approach to a 21st century problem. Just read some of your comments about that. UBI could solve a lot of that. China's birth rate is 1+, one child less per woman population will have in a couple of decades. China is not running out of people. But, the world is not running out of people. So they need cogs in the machine. Robots don't pay taxes. A good point. The one-child China policy promoted male children, so there will be some issues with gender balance too. Yeah, and there are villages where there are no women. And this can create, apart from not finding a partner, this can create civil unrest. A lot of young men with nothing to do and no prospects, in a society that's trying to convince people to have children, is a recipe for disaster. And, this is a concern that I have, is that the Chinese government may try to, go to war. A good way to get men, idle men, keep them busy in a sense, is fighting a war, because they're not sitting at home. I hope I'm wrong on that, but I would be somewhat concerned about what's happening with Taiwan at the moment, and a war with Taiwan would be extremely bloody. Do you think anti-automation laws will be needed in the future? We see, the problem is that whenever the legislation is always behind the curve, is not ahead of the curve, but always behind it. So the technology is always ahead, and we're always trying to play catch up. And it's difficult to, what do you automate? What do you automate against? So what do you legislate against in automation? Because somebody could set up a company saying, look, I don't need staff. I'm not laying off anyone. Would they be punished under that sort of legislation? It's not just a case of laying people off, but not actually employing anyone. And we're seeing companies like Amazon are trying to push for driverless vehicles. So your next delivery could be, brought by a van without a driver. They would say it saves money. It's safer. We don't have these drivers who are stuck in their vans for hours on end, having to pee inside bottles and stuff like that. If you present it in that way, it's better to have it automated, but then people won't have a job. Gareth, thanks so much for that super chat. Many houses in the UK were actually supposed to be rebuilt in the mid 1970s. What did I mean? Post-war UK built an abundance of short-term prefabbed. My home supposed to be demolished in 1975, and it's still standing, I imagine. So the houses were built just for like 30 years. They were not planning to extend them any longer than that. That means that they probably thought back in the 1940s or 1950s, well, don't worry, governments in the future will care about people if there are mold problems or whatever. Of course, they're going to invest in repairing those or replacing them. And then the Tories came along, and Margaret Thatcher came along. Thanks for that, Gareth, and I hope that, there aren't too many problems in your home. So guys, we're almost at the end of the stream for tonight. I want to say thank you so much to everyone who came on. There was another story I wanted to talk about, the NHS, but we've run out of time. But before we finish, we have our one for the road. So have a great weekend. We have our Sunday roast on Sunday morning. Everything should be okay if we don't have any problems. Hopefully I'll see you on Sunday morning. Have a great weekend until Sunday. And enjoy this one for the road.
Hello, barista individual. Please may I receive a cup of coffee like a normal human being, which is what I am? Sure. I'm Jeremy Hunt. You might know me as a 2-time leadership loser and repeated Freudian slip, and yet somehow I'm now the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Funny how things turn out. Well, not funny, ha-ha. While my coffee is being manufactured, let me tell you about all of the mess we've made of the country. You might be thinking that things used to be sort of okay and now they're really bad. So how did we get here? Well, it really started with austerity. George Osborne's brilliant decision to tackle the global financial crisis by slashing investment, like a medieval doctor treating your flu by amputating your leg. Then COVID came along and we gave loads of money to our friends, allowed businesses to profiteer, let loads of people die and even more get sick, and after that there were supply chain issues, and not just with the PPE we ended up burning. And we can't forget Brexit, although like everyone else around here, I'm really trying to. I used to think it was a terrible idea, and now I pretend I think it's a good idea, but mostly I'm just going la la la. Then last year, Putin declared war on Ukraine, and Truss and Kwarteng declared war on the UK economy. What a pair of Jeremies. So what am I going to do to halve inflation? Well, I'm going to wait a few weeks, because inflation is calculated over 12 months, and the big energy price spikes happened last year, so even if we do absolutely nothing, inflation is almost guaranteed to fall. But what that means is just that the rate at which you're getting poorer is slowing down. You're still getting poorer. So what are we doing about that? Well, we're engaging in culture war issues like trans rights and small boats, in the hope that that will make you so angry you'll forget about the economy. We're investing in renewable resources like plinky plonky piano music that we can use in the background of all of our videos. And we're making the difficult decision to go to war with the unions, in the hope that the public will start blaming people for asking for pay rises when households are facing the biggest drop in living standards since records began. But most of all, we're crossing our fingers really, really tightly in the hope that something turns up. That's the plan. Wish me luck. Although you're the ones who'll need it. Cheers, and cheers, Rio. Is the garlic in this?
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, guys, have a great weekend. I'll see you on Sunday, hopefully. If I don't see you on Sunday, I'll see you on Tuesday, same bad time, same bad channel. Have a great weekend, and as always, take care. Good night.